Let me do this in terms of the specifics that we do know. And I just want to connect a few dots. And all of these dots are already out there. This is nothing special and brand new. You just got to connect them. Question one was, is George Martin a racist? That may not be the first question in order of things happening, but it's one of the big questions that's out there in the court of public opinion. The evidence is that he comes from a racially diverse family. His mother was Peruvian. He mentored two young African-American children, he and his wife. When the funding for that ran out, they spent their own money to do that. That will be able to be confirmed. Took the young boy down to see Dwight Howard. They took him to other special activities. Doesn't sound like the activities of a racist who's out there trying to hunt people down. He's not a member of the Aryan Nation, if you will. He's got friends, including Joe Oliver, who was brave enough to come forward and stand up for him. He's got other African-American friends who, frankly, were afraid for their jobs and their safety to come forward in light of the public furor that has been raised in this case. There's absolutely no evidence, direct evidence whatsoever that he's a racist. Well, but he made 40 phone calls. Yeah, he's a neighborhood watch guy. He does that. Well, we found 17 of them, and like 8 or 9 of them, the guy turned out to be black. Well, that's true, and in every single instance, he was asked, just like in this one, does he look white, Hispanic, or black? And he said, yeah, he looks black. It's not like, oh my God, there's a black guy in the neighborhood, send the cops. There's no evidence whatsoever from the time that the earth cooled through right this minute that George Zimmerman ever has been or is racially motivated to go and stalk somebody, racially profile them, or as a congressman said, hunt him down like a dog and shoot him in the street. There's nothing to support that. Here's what the facts show. The facts as the statement given by George Zimmerman the night that he talked to the police, a story repeated by his father, a story repeated by his brother, and you say, well, they're all in on it. Really? Guess what? The absence of witnesses to the contrary doesn't mean that it happened the way you would rather have the context come out. So the only living eyewitness to exactly what happened is George Zimmerman. He's been consistent, and the evidence is consistent with what he said. I'm sorry. We had the situation where we have the eyewitness that says the guy in the red sweater was on the ground, the other guy was on top of him beating him, and the guy on the bottom was yelling for help. He looked at me and asked me to get help. I went in to call 911 for the guy in the orange sweater. We know who that was. It's George Zimmerman. And while I was inside trying to call 911, I heard the pop. Nobody but George Zimmerman purports to know the most important 2 or 3 seconds in the entire incident, and that's who swung on who first. Zimmerman says, and you hear part of this on the 911 tape, I'm following the guy because as I'm on the way out to go grocery shopping on Sunday evening at Target, I see this guy. It's getting dark. He's over 6 feet tall. He doesn't say that, but that's what he sees. He's kind of slinking along behind the back of the buildings. If you've seen the photograph, there's a sidewalk that goes between 2 sets of townhouses. And here's this guy that he doesn't recognize. He's a neighborhood watch guy. He knows his neighbors. Doesn't recognize him in a gated neighborhood. Doesn't mean he's doing anything illegal. But if you're in the rain, in the dark, going along the back side of residences with no apparent purpose, it's at least suspicious enough to take a moment to check it out. He goes down this sidewalk and we hear the 911 tape. They say, are you following him? Yes. Well, we don't need you to do that. That's reported as he was ordered to stop. No, they said, we don't need you to do that. And his answer was, okay. He then talks to them, and much of this was cut off of the 911 tape. He says, okay, I think actually ask him, see if you can get an address. If you're not going to follow him, when the cops get there, can you tell him where he went? So he goes down the sidewalk, gets the address, and he's headed back to his car when, according to him, he's accosted by Trayvon Martin. He turns him around, says, do you have a problem with me? He says no, and in response to which Trayvon Martin, in a horrible exercise of bad judgment, says, well, you do now, and hit him in the nose, which we later turned out broke his nose, dropped him to the ground, got on top of him, and is hitting him. We've had people say, well, how do you explain the fact that Trayvon Martin is face down and George Zimmerman standing up? This doesn't take rocket science. George Zimmerman's still alive. That's why he's standing up. And the reason that Trayvon is face down is because George was on his back and Trayvon was face down on top of him when he got shot and fell the rest of the way down. There's no great mystery here unless you start with the conclusion and try to work back to put it in context the way you want it. Too much of that has taken place. You're going to find that there's Injuries to the back of his head, forget the foggy tape at the police department. The EMTs will have a report in there that they treated him, they cleaned up the blood, his nose really is broken. You're likely, I would suppose, to find grass stains on the bottom of George Zimmerman's clothing and not on Trayvon's. There's all kinds of evidence that they may have forensically that we don't have access to. We're not entitled to it. You're not entitled to it. But all the evidence that has come out is consistent with the story that George Zimmerman has told. It is inconsistent with the storyline that the family, I don't know about what the family really wants to believe, but we've had some people come to town who are only relevant in an area of racial strife. On February 26th, that Sunday morning, most of us went to church and sat in mixed congregations, and we didn't think we were in a community of seething racial violence and tension. Sunday night, all of a sudden, after this incident happens, people start coming to town who frankly have a business model based on driving division in racial communities. They've been making speeches, having rallies, pumping their fists in the air, setting out bounties for people. No justice, no peace. But as long as justice is defined as arrest him right now, actually had an attorney for the Martin family, who as far as we know actually went to law school, get on the air and say they need to just go ahead and arrest him and let him prove his innocence in a court of law. Really? In the United States? I don't think so.